keep this train moving. And so today, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about that perfect balance of prospect and customer engagement at scale. And so I just wanted a show of hands. There's a lot of sales leadership in the room. How many would say that today they feel that their reps are too reliant on automation and tools? Any show of hands? Well, I don't see a lot of hands, but hopefully after this presentation, you will feel that way with some of these stats and things. To give you a little bit background about myself, Director of Marketing at Mixmax, but don't let the baby face fool you here. I've been working very closely with sales development at Fortune 500 companies, Inc. 5000 as a CMO, and building from the ground up at startups at seed stage. And to get into it, I actually first cut my teeth as an account executive. And sales back then was a little bit different. It still has some of those elements today, but I remember very fondly about the days when I was tasked with getting a white page. The white page is C through D. During the peak of the recession, I was trying to sell jobs into construction companies. I can tell you firsthand, I learned more curse words on that job than anywhere else. And back then, it was all about peppering the phone book to get to your number. Fast forward to today, I think a lot of executives, and there's a lot of thought leadership, we really kind of have this ideal state of where sales is going. And when we think about kind of the new age of sales, we think about like a sales rep sitting there with 6 different monitors, constantly monitoring what's going on with their prospects and spending something like 10 hours of background research to send one personalized email. And the reality is it's just not happening that way. And so if we look what's actually happening, is sales peaked over the aisle. You're seeing a lot with marketing where we're using marketing automation tools like HubSpot, Marketo, and you guys saw that we were putting out thousands of emails in the form of newsletters or drip campaigns, and sales wanted that as well. And so there's a lot of automation tools that kind of came into the market, what we kind of call mass emailers and mass dialers. And at the end of the day, you saw a lot of this happening. So, I ran SDR teams before, and our activity went up out through the roof. And it was very effective at first, but we're seeing that, that really waned down quite a bit. And so you went from something like it only took maybe about 6 or 7 dials back in my day to actually reach a prospect. It's taking up to 18 nowadays. And the average kind of open rate for some of your emails are about 23.9%. And so that's a lot of wasted time. And the reason that we are kind of like putting these mass email lists is because of a couple of factors that I want to get into. And so first, that why behind there is a couple of trends. So I think many of you have seen this stat. Inside Sales actually polled a bunch of account executives, and they found about 63% of their time is spent on non-selling activities. And so a lot of that is context switching between different systems, logging different activity notes, and in addition to that, just doing a lot of just admin cleanup. And that's really affecting our teams today. And so while we are tasking them with these kind of personalizations in our head, I have Ray in the back here who works for us, and half the time I think that he should be spending time finding the prospect on Facebook, finding where that VP has their daughter's soccer game, coming in there as the ref and helping him win the game, anything that can close the deal. In reality, he just doesn't have the time. So how do we look at this from like an orchestration level? So there's a couple of reasons why this trend is happening. So first, all of our reps are flooded with tools. So if you think it's getting really scarce, there used to be just a couple dozen, and now it's starting to become much more like MarTech. A couple dozen now, we're getting into the thousands of solutions. And it's putting a lot of burden on our sales reps. And as much as I'd love to go for the glittering generalities that marketing provides, saying this is going to be a revolutionary tool, a game changer, a lot of times at the end of the day, it doesn't happen that way. We have Carlo here, our head of RevOps, who's amazing to work with, but it's really sad at the end of the day when I bring on a new tool for the marketing team or the sales teams that a lot of times it needs Carlo's help. It's going to take an enterprise account manager, and it's going to take us somewhere between 3 weeks to a month just to get the damn thing live. And with that, let me just move forward here. We are burdening our sales reps quite a bit. And so G2 Crowd did this great study of all customer-facing teams, several hundred of them. They found that when they were polled, about a quarter of them said they are ready to walk out of their job because of the crappy technologies that they have at their organization. And I love this particular GIF of I Love Lucy, where they're on that assembly line and they're supposed to be wrapping chocolates, but it's coming in too fast. And so they're eating them, they're throwing them away, and a lot of this is happening on the SDR and AE level that's not really bubbling up. And so this is a problem when we're trying to think about personalization and being relevant and very buyer-centric versus seller-centric. So, personalization is fantastic. We know we need it. We know that with our mass emailing tools, we're less effective. We're getting caught in spam filters, and people are answering their phones less and less. In addition to that, we know that our sales reps are spending the majority of their time in non-selling activities. So how do we operationalize this at scale where we can actually be effective and do things that the customer would actually feel is relevant to them? And first piece of that is starting with a foundational layer. So as much as we feel like we're empowering an SDR or a rep to go and build their own campaigns and their own outreach strategy, which is great because they get to know their customer a little bit better, at the end of the day, the ones that are a little bit more green typically will think about tactics first. And so they're thinking about, well, I read about if I put this 2-word headline in there, if I put an italics sent from my iPhone, I'm going to get a better response rate. But the foundational layer and the thing that's taking a lot of their time is your audience modeling. And so as in the leadership team, this is where you should be spending the majority of your time. I know we talk about all day long about things like your ideal customer profile, your ideal account profile, and the difference between an influencer and a decision maker. And we understand that very well when we are sitting down, the sales leadership, the marketing team gets together, right before the sales kickoff, we build these beautiful decks about those ICPs, only to be lost in Google Drive. And so at the end of the day, what happens is a lot of times those SDR reps or those AEs will just continually go back to Sales Navigator. They will go to the United States geography and pull every single VP or director they can and load those babies up. But we need to think about this a little bit different. And the great way to think about this, they've already done this. Anyone in software who's worked with product very closely have something known as a MVP, a minimal viable product. And really that's the minimal amount of work they can do to build a software where that job to be done can be completed. And what we need to think about on the sales and marketing side is a minimal viable audience. And so that's really refining your efforts. And so it's just enough audience where they're a good fit for your software solution to hit your goals instead of trying to boil the ocean. So a lot of times when we, the leadership team, we are pitching to public investors or on the private side to venture capitalists. And when we do that, we're really talking about a total addressable market, the TAM, and that spreads to our reps and to our SDRs. And instead of thinking about total addressable market, we're trying to boil the ocean, we really need to narrow it down. And a couple of those factors to look at are things like, of course, we know things like the industry, employee size, annual revenue, territory, things like function and role. But in addition to that, we have a lot more data. So Russ had talked about with some of his reps that they are starting to incorporate more data sources. We do that as well. So selfishly at Mixmax, we are built for customer-facing teams that use Gmail. So it's a miss for me when any account executive or SDR rep goes after anyone on Outlook today because we don't support it, and that is a waste of their time. So we need to be able to enrich our data and bring that into our CRM so they already know who's the best to go after. In addition to that, our CRM is sitting on a wealth of data, and now there's a lot of things like predictive lead scoring. So we'll go through the entire database. There's simple solutions like Mad Kudu to very complex solutions where engineering teams will come on site and do an audit of your CRM and build a custom model. But with that, instead of just going into LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you should actually take those lists, put it against a predictive lead score so you know the best opportunities for your reps where they should spend the most time personalizing it. And those will take factors in like, of course, like the revenue and their company size, but also things like the role and if you're a product in SaaS, how others have interacted with your platform as well. So let's talk about how the hell we actually pull this off, the orchestration part. And so earlier Kevin Higgins yesterday was talking about how prospecting is a team sport. I really loved that notion. But I would take that step even further, and I think sales development as a whole is a team sport for all go-to-market facing teams. So here's a couple of things to put foundationally in place before you have your reps kind of really hit it. And the first, I know I'm going to get a lot of grimaces here, but before you actually run, you should start with your marketing team to develop some of that campaign collateral. And I know marketers are going to do a couple of things. We're going to inject a lot of jargon. We're going to find a way to put all these different assets that we've had, try to bake it across the board. So I know that there was a mention yesterday that there was an email that came with like 7 different podcast links. It was far too much. That's definitely a marketer's hand. But there's 2 things marketers do very well. First is segmentation of database. We know how to model audiences very well, and we also know how to storytell, to thread kind of that message along. So it provides a nice framework that then sales can cut up. In addition to that, you should start with your sales ops and CRM admins up front. So I know many of us, as you go to larger organizations, CRMs are a mess. You're spending a lot of enterprise money just to clean those up. And so getting your sales ops up front, they're going to do a lot of things about bringing in the right technology and thinking about tracking. So for example, we talked about earlier 64% of reps' time is spent on non-selling activities. A big one of that is just logging notes. But solutions like Mixmax and many others, Russ talked about another one, will automatically log things like emails we've sent, calls as well, and Salesforce tasks. In addition to that, there's great software out there like Chorus or Gong that will record the calls, they'll translate them, and so at the end of the day, your rep should be focusing on customer-facing time and not logging notes. In addition to that, as an executive team, you should really think about your reporting views. And so this is where you don't get false positives. So you may have an individual SDR or rep who's doing a lot of activity to only find out that they are just cramming a bunch of prospects through an email sequence, or they're just dialing down a directory to inflate their call numbers. And you can't see this unless you have the right kind of execution and reporting views baked up front. In addition to that, the very last piece here is the centralized sequences. So my favorite reps to work with are very maverick. They try different things. They understand their audience very well. But that's very hard to move that across the team unless you centralize things. And in addition to that, a lot of that product marketing collateral just goes to Google Drive hell. And so the best way to do that is to bring in solutions where a rep on the fly can easily pull in things. So if they're talking to sales ops, for example, and that's a key decision maker in the sale, they need to talk about GDR compliance and those kind of elements. They should be able to pull that very quickly without having to go through Google Drive, getting lost, or pinging marketing. They should be able to pull those on the fly. In addition to that, if you have a sales rep that's trying something very unique that's working, you should be able, from an executive view, to see what's going on and then scale that across the team and help your underperformers or people just ramping up. And so we've got down our audience modeling. In addition to that, we've kind of got the foundational layers of orchestration. The next is talking about the actual sequence or campaign. So we at Mixmax, we have 10,000 plus customers. We're a free trial, so we've had hundreds of thousands of people come through. As we were looking at kind of the data from the sales layer, we found a couple of things. So first, it's about 7 to 9 touches when you typically get a really good response. Now, of course, we've seen it at the first or later down the line, but on average, that's what your kind of sweet spot is. And so make sure that those sequences or those campaigns are elongated enough to actually hit that mark. In addition to that, you see things like sales touches work best up front. That's not to say if someone misses your email, you might hit them up or like retweet them on Twitter, that it won't work. But for the most part, people are on to you. So when you're doing things like LinkedIn touches, you should actually do that before you start your phone outreach or your email outreach. And the data for us says that that person's less susceptible to being sold to, and they think it's more of like a general touch when it's up front, and they will actually be more receptive to it. Or down the line, after you've been emailing them, hammering them a couple times, they're less likely to interact with you on social. And the very last one is when you're looking at your ideal sequences, I've seen very long ones work, especially in the enterprise, but ideally about 13 steps is what we've seen from our data work and have the best impact there. So when you're thinking about kind of a framework of how much you should do personalization, how much you should kind of rely on automation, it is a balance. So as I go back, I can't expect Raymond to spend 10 hours researching a prospect and then building one email. He'll never hit his number. And we already know that the majority of his time is spent in other places than actively selling. So a good framework that we have, this is actually from Topo. For people on the East Coast or Midwest, they may be less familiar with this consulting agency. They're really big on the West Coast, but they built this framework I think works really well. And so as a leader, when you're looking at how much time should be spent or where should be focusing your time, you should really break out your accounts by bucket size, your total ACV. And this is just a good general guiding light. So for more of your transactional SMB deals, there's nothing wrong with full automation. And I'll show you a little bit later how you can still personalize those based on your CRM data. But you still need kind of that transactional layer to feed the beast, if you will. And so there's nothing wrong with fully automating pieces of that. In addition to that, when you start looking more at that mid-tier, that's when you should be personalized about 20%. And so that's where I really love email tasks. Instead of coming in and having an email automatically fire, that rep that day will get a task for that email, a template that kind of gives some parameters, but then they can customize it to their liking based on different discussions or that individual. And then finally, when you're going fully personalized, that's really more of your enterprise, your big fish deals. And that's where there's a lot of solutions out there where instead of worrying about these automated layers of it automatically going out, you may just send an individual email, and right within your inbox, you have the ability to schedule it for later, saying, hey, if this person doesn't reply in 3 days, bubble this back up to the top of my inbox, and then I'm going to do another personalized outreach that way. And so even though this is a good framework, many of you may not have these ACV deals. For example, at Mixmax, we're much lower. I like to say value packed, but you can still cut out from your organization kind of your smallest, your mid-size, and your top deals. And this provides a good framework of where you should be spending your reps' time. They should not be personalizing every single email for your small fish, your transactional deals. They really should be spending the time with those bigger, longer cycles. So putting this all together, now we can actually get to tactics. And on tactics, so we had talked about your minimal viable audience that you've built, and you kind of do that as a team sport. Your execution layer, so you're bringing in marketing, you're bringing in sales ops, you're bringing in executives, you're building a framework for your team. And then finally, these are the ones on the tactical level that you can execute where you can give your reps a lot more freedom and availability. But here's some tips to actually get higher response rates and more meetings booked. So the very first is you should always personalize your first touch. And you may think that's different than what I just said with that Topo framework, but personalization can also be based on your data. So the beautiful thing here is when you're doing that data modeling with your sales ops person, make sure you're getting it into your CRM, make sure you're capturing all those fields. In addition to that, you can do a lot of custom variables. So if you already know the top things that keep a sales ops person or a VP of sales up at night, you can put those in different columns and assign them variables. And you can even personalize that to yourself. So if you can actually put a note field, for example, in Salesforce, bring that in as a custom variable saying, hey, we just talked and I know these 3 things are your top pain points. And then you can actually automate that in a particular sequence. And for the less automated, so the ones that you want to do hyper-personalized or that kind of mid-layer, this just acts as a nice guiding light. So you can apply a template, but really just go and cut it up. And it acts as a nice holder where then you go and you personalize that message based on a conversation or what you're seeing from their activity online. The second one, and this is probably the hardest as a marketer, is just to keep it brutally simple. And so as the marketing side, again, we are very jargon laden, and heaven forbid your marketer actually wants to do some category creation. That's terrible. But when you are sending these things out, especially if you're talking to different areas outside of the New York hub or the San Francisco hub, so for example, when I'm talking about campaigns or sequences, there was a very large Midwest company, very prominent today in the Fortune 500, who are still using templates in the form of Word docs, and they were copying and pasted over. And so when I go to an investor pitch, and I'm talking about Mixmax being a one-to-one customer engagement tool, that's not actually resonating with my end buyer. That's really a pitch to get more money. And so Raymond, as an account executive, he should not be using that kind of language. He really needs to dumb it down to the point that anyone can easily understand it, and you take out a lot of that jargon. So the third one here is the add social touches but go long. So I can't tell you, it seems like every morning when you rise, you go on LinkedIn, there's another screenshot of an SDR who did a LinkedIn in-mail message right after they requested to be their connection, and those people are getting continually called out. The best thing to do, and this actually plays well for anyone who's done the dating scene on the app side of things, is to be very mysterious. So instead of, if you had a genuine connection with them, like at this event, you can keep it very light with that in-mail. At the end of the day, one of the best things to do is to actually connect with them on mobile. You don't have to require any message. It keeps them kind of interested, and that, as I was speaking about before, should be at the very kind of beginning of your sequence, and that's where you're going to see the greatest impact. And heaven forbid, do not, after they accept your request, try to sell them on anything. That's just supposed to be a light touch point. They put a face to a name. You get them in network. In addition to that, you should be sharing content. So on LinkedIn right now, it's like the old days of Facebook. If you have a great video from your company, upload it, and virtually like probably about 30% of your connections are going to see that viral video. And so today, the organic reach, that's a great way of kind of getting ahead of your prospect. The fourth is to experiment with rich media. So I know this is a big no-no on the sales development side. I completely understand that there's 2 or 3 sentences, reads well on mobile, alt text works. That's what's going to get you the initial reply. But after that fact, so they're already engaging with you, that's where you need a lot more personalization, and you're going to see a better kind of output. So this is an actual email that one of our reps sent, and this is marked up from the prospect. So this was a VP of sales who came back, was very excited about what was going on in this particular email. And you can see the personalization elements, everything from the subject line to taking elements from our database saying, this is how many of your reps are actively using our tool right now. And we automated that particular piece to give them that insight. In addition to that, inserting things like your calendar. So you're cutting the back and forth and allowing someone to book immediately right within the email. And then doing things like experimenting with polls, we've seen much higher engagement rates. For example, the team at Gong, they've used polls and they've seen something like a 55% reply rate from inserting those within the sales process. The tactic number 5, really keep it succinct. So you just want 1 CTA per email. So a lot of times you're going to want to oversell. There's a lot of things, your solution can be very complex. You're trying to solve a lot of problems. At the end of the day, you're just trying to get it to the next step. So to book that meeting or to get them on the phone. And so make sure it's very focused and you're just focusing on one particular pain point or area at a time. This last tactic, scheduling your emails. So there's a lot of great data out there. We read it all the time, where you will find a lot of these vendors will provide these big benchmark reports. It's fantastic, but at the same time, it needs to be taken with a huge grain of salt. So when you're looking at these particular pieces, you may find that what you don't think about is there's usually a blend of B2B and B2C emails. In addition to that, there's about 126 business emails that you're vying against for someone's attention. So in that individual day, if everybody sends it at Tuesday at 10 o'clock, for example, then that inbox is going to be flooded. It's not going to be as effective. So use these benchmarks. They are helpful, but you really need to start experimenting a lot more. There's brand new solutions out there that I'm really excited about that will actually look at individuals' in mailbox, look at their peak activity time, and you can schedule that. So if you know, I know there's some experimentation if you've ever done a lot of sales development. If you're going after an executive, a great time to reach out to them is on Sunday. Either they're putting the kids to bed, but a lot of times, as Russ was mentioning, he's going with his active journal. He's thinking about what he's going to bring to the team Monday. And so that's a great time to reach out. And so there's a lot of solutions out here today. As you can see, this particular piece where you can schedule at a particular time. I do this selfishly when I'm trying to get budget approvals from my CEO. He's not going to listen to me at 11 a.m., but around 2 or 3 in the morning when he's because he doesn't ever sleep, he's going to respond back to me immediately with a yes or no. And so these are very effective solutions that you're starting to see in the market. And I'd be remiss if I didn't actually talk about why I'm here today and the company paying for my minibar tab. But Mixmax, for those who don't know, is a solution that's very lightweight, that is really about increasing reply and engagement rates by using elements like automation, but in a very smart way and doing ABM at scale. Thank you for your time.